Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the FIDE Grand Prix. It is the 5th round of 6 in the groups, and that means that slowly but surely we are getting to see who is going to be the qualifier to make it into the knockout semifinals. And that's it. That's all I have to say. Hope you had a good rest day. Hope you enjoyed the video yesterday of Magnus drawing the 2400 rated player. I know that Yuri Averbach, oldest grandmaster in the world, turned 100 years old. I know that. I just don't want to put 2-3 videos out a day. So when we have a break in the Grand Prix action, I will be making a video about that as well. This video is sponsored by nobody. So, first game I have to show you is the game between HIKARU Nakamura and Alexander Grishuk. This is a big game, obviously, because it's yet to be determined. Like, is Grishuk going to try to make a big push with black? And he does. Sasha plays the King's Indian defense, which on its own is not the craziest thing in the world, but it's not played at 2750 plus anymore, almost ever. I'd be shocked the last time two 2750s played a King's Indian defense. The reason is, in the modern day, Leela, Stockfish, they've proven many different approaches to squeezing the King's Indian like a lemon, getting all the juice out. And there is just no way for black to develop meaningful counterplay. HIKARU opts for, actually, this is crazy when I saw this. He opts for one of my favorite systems. I love the two-bishop system. The two-bishop system intends to attack with the pawns before this knight can move. So the idea is that you don't actually play knight to f3, and you just try to play h4, h5, g4 sometimes. And there's a lot of different aggressive and interesting game plans. Now, at this point, there are two ways to play King's Indian. Black can play for e5, and black can play for c5. There are the rest, like c6 and very cagey, not very confrontational approaches. Grishuk spends 18 minutes here, which is nuts. Like, that is insane. There is one person on planet Earth who would spend 18 minutes in this position, and it's Grishuk. The reason is, if you go into a King's Indian, you know what you're going to play. You're either going to go for a c5 or an e5. Both of those are legal and good moves. But to spend 18 minutes, I mean, the man was not trying to find the best move. He knows the moves. He was trying to choose. But it's like being at a buffet and spending 18 minutes looking at steak or chicken or vegetarian option, you know? It's like, just make a choice. You don't need to... So anyway, I mean, HIKARU blitzes out his next move. Grishuk spends a little bit, knight a6, and black's game plan is to put a knight on c5. Support the move knight c5 with the move a5. Maybe c6 to crack at the center. This knight oftentimes rotates back, and black will try to play f5, but white will try to attack first. So let's watch all that in action. So HIKARU plays h4. I've played g4 here. h4 is also very good. Knight c5, queen c2. We obviously have to defend this pawn. And now my opponents generally do this. They do not let me take the queenside space, the kingside space. But h5 actually is very risky because the pawn becomes a target. It's just a little bit dangerous. And Grishuk opts for c6. HIKARU blitzes out h5 because that's obviously the entire purpose of the opening. We have takes, queen a5. So queen a5 pins the knight and threatens to take on e4. But white has a move here. Now, do you want to take on g6 and activate the position? Or do you want to play h6 and push the bishop back? Now, the engine in modern era loves this concept. It loves the fact that you suffocate black with your bare hands. Well, I mean, you know, consensually, with a safe word. But, you know, the thing is, this pawn is so annoying. Number one, the king is weaker. There's inherent liability on, you know, you don't have the escape off the back rank. The second thing is, this bishop is going to take multiple moves to get out. Knight d7, bishop, and here. And third, this pawn is, if it leaves for any reason, we're just pushing. We're pushing P, by the way. It's pushing H, but, you know. So HIKARU then defends the middle. Now, at this point, Grishuk was down like an hour on the clock. HIKARU has played every move instantly. And he said after the game, actually, he said that somehow he predicted Grishuk might play a King's Indian, and he predicted Grishuk's first, like, 17 moves. Which is nuts, the fact that he had all this prepared. It's not nuts in the sense that he knew it before the game. It's nuts that he actually guessed that it might happen. And the reason is that this position, 14 moves of the game, have happened before in 2 games, in 2 top-level games. So now we have queen d2 blocking the pin. We have takes. And here I think b6 and b5 have been played. Grishuk chooses to bring the queen back. Now, here's the problem with the way he's playing this position. He is being restricted on both sides of the board. HIKARU plays g4. He's going to play knight h3. He's going to play knight back to f2. Black has nothing here. He's not getting his typical f5. And how the hell is black going to create counterplay on the queen side when my bishops stare on the entire queen side as well? So black has nothing. Except the computer here wanted Grishuk to sack his bishop. And I was actually shocked. Apparently, white's advantage vanishes with the move g4. FG, knight e4, hits the queen, queen moves. Knight takes c3, hits the rook, but you're pinned, so not really. But for example, if I play bishop d2, black plays e4, and all of a sudden that bishop got active without actually moving. And the thing is that now black can also play f5 and also rook c8 and also rook e8. So actually, for the cost of the piece, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's really not. And then you can take on d5 and your queen is protected. So actually g4, I'm very curious to hear Hikaru's thoughts on this sacrifice, because Grishuk didn't do it. He just absolutely didn't do it. He allowed Hikaru to put his knight back on f2, and then as he tried to break his bishop out of jail, which and notice Hikaru castling. I mean, that's how big of a flex is, because black just can't play f5. You think you're attacking white? Who is attacking who? You're not attacking anybody. So a couple moves later, we had a trade of knights, and we entered this phase of the game where the players have identical structure. Only one pawn has been traded, and it's a b-file pawn. And the rest of the position, white dominates spatially. White completely dominates every side of the board. When you're losing on 3 sides of the board, you're losing! Does that make sense? Are you paying attention yet? So f4, Hikaru looks to make a breakthrough where he's supported by everybody. And again, Grishuk's time is very low, and he has to get to the 40th move of the game to get the extra 30 minutes. And he has very little time to do it in a progressively worse and worse position. Hikaru just takes some space. Rook b8, obviously trying to fight back queen c3. f6. I mean, obviously threatening a mate, right? So we have to protect against mate. Now Hikaru plays rook b3. Idea of rook b3, couple options. Maybe double up, try to get a trade out, crack at this in the future with g5. And now we have rook b6 by Grishuk. And he misses Hikaru's idea. Hikaru plays an outstanding move here. G5 first, obviously on its own, not incredibly amazing, but the next move is white to play and basically load up overwhelming pressure on the black position. Sometimes to take a step forward in life, you have to take a step back. Bishop c1. 2 steps back, kind of not, I mean, 2 steps in the other direction, and the game is over. The game is simply over. Bishop b2, Hikaru plays king g2. He can kind of stay patient. He actually doesn't have to rush. And for a while, he doesn't rush, but then it gets real spicy because Grishuk goes for a trap. Queen c3 threatens mate, but Grishuk thinks he's escaping with rook takes rook. This is absolutely incredible. Rook takes on f1, and for example, if you take, then there is king f7, and the king runs. And the thing is, the king is going to run anyway. But Hikaru takes on h7, check first, king e8, queen g6. Now here's the thing. If you go back with the rook, h7, you're queening. The whole point, the h-pawn, is making it through. So king e7, Hikaru takes, how many pawns has this man taken? He just drove in with the queen and took everybody. He's looting the store, queen g5. Grishuk here has to play king d7. You gotta play king d7, and the bishop hits the queen, and the game continues. There's a crazy fight ensuing, but Grishuk on the 40th and final move of the time control plays rook back to f6. His intention was obviously bishop f6, queen f6, and protecting the promotion. But Hikaru plays h7. And maybe Grishuk thought there was some strong counterplay coming with king d7. But just queen g8. And rook f2 check, king g1, queen f4. I make a second queen, I look you straight in the face, and I go, where's the mate, brother? You have nothing, but I am threatening a mate. So Grishuk chooses not to even engage in this and resigns. This is a humongous victory for Hikaru. I mean, just absolutely huge win. It cannot be understated how big this is. However, we must look at some other games as well. From Group B, we had Wojtaszek and Fereseyev. These are the group leaders. They played a Queen's Gambit declined, so this can either go into a theoretical direction or non-theoretical direction. It goes into a very theoretical direction. So black plays the move c5. Anytime in a Queen's Gambit declined, you see a cube here. What's going to happen is we're going to get some chopping. Chop, 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 leaving black with an isolated pawn. And if white can successfully blockade on d4 and win this pawn in the future, white will be winning. But if black successfully activates all the pieces around the pawn, it's going to be very difficult to for white to make any progress. So white does trade a little bit, but this pawn maintains some strength. Queen is coming to c2, and this might be the fastest recap of a game I can possibly show. I have talked about when you have an isolated pawn, you want to use the active squares around it. So for example, bishop e6 here, f e6, queen b7. Black's idea is to play rook c7. If you come back, then I will play, I mean, I can even go back to c4 and try to get over here. That might be a way to go. And I'm threatening mate. So black is ready to give a pawn up for activity. And Wojtaszek actually doesn't even want the pawn. And the activity stays anyway. Now both sides have an isolated pawn, and on moves 27 to 30, they repeat moves. So a quick draw between the group leaders of Group B. They maintain a top position. Another game from, actually, we can actually very quickly go to the other game in Group B. This game was also a Queen's Gambit declined. But in this game, we did not get bishop to e7. We got the semi-Tarrasch with c5, which actually became a completely symmetrical 5 moves. I mean, we can basically call it a draw right now, right? But not really. Takes, and white goes for, again, an isolated pawn position where there's some pressure on this knight. Bishop d7 castles. And here I'm familiar with a very tricky move for white, e4. Just trying to explode the center of the board. The problem is if black knows everything, black just is fine. But I've won a lot of blitz games like this. de4, bishop g5, like a crazy attack for the cost of 1 pawn. But again, if black freaks out, then you win. And if black doesn't freak out, then you don't win. So knight f3, playing against the isolated pawn. Very similar games, right? Blockading the isolated pawn square. Black just has to be active around it. White actually visually has a very nice position. And now knight e2 to try to go knight d4, knight f4. Knight to e4 is a nice idea. We have knight f4, takes, and f6. This is potentially the moment in the game where Rapport has his best position. He has the bishop pair. He's going to play queen e2, targeting the knight. And you'll notice that he's got a counterpart right here. So he protects it, rook e8, and goes back to b1. But again, black is very active. So we see the isolated pawn allowing the other side to get some super active play. Rook e1, queen to f7, rook d1, knight g3. And all of a sudden, there are some very big problems for white to solve here. So queen d2, now you actually could go knight e2. King h1, and if you take the rook, you just have to be careful, because I'm going to go here. So you have to be a little bit careful. You have to actually consider bishop takes b1, rook b1, but now I'm out of the way, and your knight is sort of stuck. So rook e2 played, and now, folks, we begin a massive simplification. Queens are off. Bishops are off. Bishop and knight are off. Rook comes to d8. Rook c5. Some pawns are going to fly off the board as well, but material stays completely equal. And actually, Biden was the one pressuring. His rooks became much more active and useful than Rapport's. Rapport here had his worst position of the game, where he was forced to really liquidate into a rook endgame. But again, it's black harassing white. So Rapport's going to try to make this draw, and he does. Very close. He gets into a rook endgame where he's a pawn down, but very active. And again, I've talked about activity very much in rook endgames. This is perhaps the greatest example of it, where a guy can be 2 pawns up. Now, f and h against nothing is a draw with best play, but it's especially a draw when the attacking king is completely cut off. If the king can't get involved, black has no moves, because black can go rook g5. I will just go here. If you come back, I can even do this. This is just a drawn king and pawn endgame. So all the games in Group B are a draw, which sets us up for a final round matchup where Wojtaszek and Fedoseev are up top, and Rapport is half a point behind. So anything can happen. Anything can happen in Group B. Yeah, we're gonna see. We're gonna see ultimately what the result is. Group D matchup between Shirov and Wesley So was Berlin, and actually a full Berlin wall. The mainline Berlin wall from the match between Kasparov and Kramnik. H3 and knight c3, ultra mainline stuff. H5 to prevent white from this g4. Bishop f4, bishop b4, looking to take and damage the structure. White says no thank you. White offers an exchange. And a couple moves later, we're gonna get knight and bishop off the board here. So opposite colored position with rooks and 7 pawns each. Well, you can kind of expect where this is going. Actually, if anybody's better here, it's black, because black is about to have control of this file. Actually has a bishop targeting something tangible and has the more active king. And h4, I mean, rook h5 is coming. But the problem is that it's the Berlin at the end of the day. So even if, you try to snag a pawn, there's things that can complicate the game. So we have bishop to e1, and even with this ultra passive approach to the position, black is unable to really get much of anything. Shirov gets a little active, makes a nice little consolidation here, and the players repeat moves. I mean, look, when you play knight f6, it's basically indicating that you're okay with the draw. That's Wesley is the leader in his group, so he has absolutely zero pressure to play for a win. And another game I would like to show you is Daniil Dubov versus Vidit Gujrathi. This one was pretty exciting. The game might look similar to you. Where did we just see this? Huh? A3. So Dubov doesn't play into CD5 stuff, which we just saw a report play. DC, A6, and black actually does get some nice expansion here. Now, Dubov here plays something absolutely incredible. He plays Queen E2, Rook D1, so you cannot take my knight, right? B4, and he takes on D4. So, he gives away his knight, but D5 explodes the center. Oh my god. I mean, for example, if black plays knight E7, he loses. DE, I'm attacking this, and you might even hang mate. That's mate. Imagine. It's not gonna happen. Instead of that, Vidit, very, very smart man, just says, you can have my horse. You can just take my knight back because I've equalized. But Rook D3 is a problem because White is not interested in taking with the pawn. White is interested in keeping a 2-on-1. And if you take on B2, I'm gonna take and you're gonna have huge difficulty developing. I mean, this is really, really bad. I mean, a knight up is good. A pawn up for this is not good. So bishop to E7 takes, black castles, and Dubov has a very nice position. He has a 2-on-1 on the queen side. I think he has a clear chances for an advantage. It's up to black to figure out how to consolidate. Vidit plays passively, but here comes bishop B1. I mean, listen, I would love to have this for White, at least in a blitz game. I mean, I don't know about against Vidit, but at least in a blitz game. So bishop F6, and now he's trying to be active with his bishop here, The knight is rerouting, the rook is challenging this rook. And before Dubov can play like queen D3 and deliver mate, Vidit is going to try to trade some material. So in a few moves, he is able to trade one rook. He is now able to go for a second rook trade. So now with no rooks on the board, it's going to be a little harder to mate him. He plays queen C8. He targets this. And Dubov gives him the pawn because he's going to win the A6 pawn. So he has an outside pass pawn now in all endgames, which obviously must be nice. Seems like he has some good chances, but Dubov locks the bishop away. He's like, you're locked in here with me. And now it's kind of up to Dubov to figure out how to do this. But we have a trade. We have bishop back to D8, and the bishop is able to view here and defend this. And White kind of begins a process of maybe making some progress. But king F7, king F6, E5, and I mean, the game can go on for a little bit more with bishop B3, bishop G8, etc. But Dubov instead plays F3 and G4. And now we have knight F4, takes, and the game, again, can proceed a little bit longer, but Dubov just goes here. And the point is that if this, the bishop can now break free by virtue of taking the knight. We have opposite colored bishops. Both sides have a passed pawn. It's just a draw. So, an interesting game, for sure, but Vidit was very, very precise in liquidating. But yeah, I mean, Group C, unfortunately, has one absolute savage in it. And that savage is named Levan Ranyan. That savage is named Levan Ranyan, who before this game has 3 out of 4, 2 wins, 2 draws. And this game, Keimer is going for his throat. He's like, yo, Levan, I'm going to beat you, and then I'm going to catch up to you, and I'm going to stir up some trouble in this section for everybody. So, here we go. Rogozin. Queen to A4 check makes the knight block the C-pawn and defend the bishop. E3 castles, queen back to C2. And White in the Rogozin will play bishop D2, take back the pawn, short castle, sometimes create an attack. Black is going to try to break out with E5. In fact, Black is going to try to do that immediately. Now, the best move here, I believe, for White is to castle. If my theory is correct. Castle, don't deal with this stuff in the middle. White's other best move is to play D5. Just basically say like, okay, if you're letting me play D5, I will. We have Queen C5. So if you take my knight, I take the bishop. Queen C5, knight E4, force line. So defending this, hits the queen. There's a trade possibility. Now we have knight E4, queen E4. And the move that I'm familiar with here is this move, knight D4. Now that move looks incredibly absurd because it's just getting in the way of everything. It's very smart though. If ED4, you have queen C4, and actually black is much better because these pawns are bad. So knight D4 getting in the way of everybody is what I know. But Levon plays knight e7. Now, I don't know the move knight e7. The reason I don't know it is because, well, I mean, it's Levon. He knows something about chess that I don't. The point is obviously to support something on f5. It's also to attack this. And if white just castles here, which may look like the best move, I don't know what Levon had planned, but I'm sure that bishop f5 does not look very pleasant at all. So Keimer here takes on e5. He's like, Levon, I don't know what the hell you're up to. I'm actually completely fine losing my right to castle because I have a pawn. And if you check me, I go to c1. Now, Levon obviously must have foreseen this possibility. The fact that he would be in a position of pawn down. But it's kind of hard to play with white. I mean, black can go back to c5. Now, again, if we just quickly look at this, check here, queen c5, white could repeat. White actually could repeat moves. Because we just had this exact position, right? We literally just had this position. Levon repeats once, but perhaps Keimer didn't like something. He didn't like something about repeating. He thought that he would try to make progress with his position here, so he goes for g4. And g4 is very smart, because if black just voluntarily retreats to g6, well, I mean, I don't think that's going to happen, but obviously, you know, it's a possibility. The other thing is there is knight g6. Knight g6, queen f5 obviously takes in here, which is good for black, but g4, knight g6, there is queen d4, offering a trade of queens. And white is doing fine. But here things got crazy. g4 was met with g5! You can take with check, but then this, and you can't guard both things. You're gonna lose both things, either f6 or b5. The bishop is pinned to the king, insane. So Keimer plays b4. What is this? Everything is hanging. Best move, queen b4, now queen d4. So we have a position where white has 6 pawns, black has 6 pawns. Both sides are super weak. Knight g6, bishop back to b3, queen check, king out to d2 again, and Aranyan tries to explode the center here. If you take en passant, obviously rook d8, you suck. So, or rook fd8 is even better. So queen c3, knight e5, but I'm taking your bishop. I have no intention of taking your knight. I'm gonna go for this. By the way, computer this whole time is screaming 0-0-0, but this is not a 0-0 position when you're the one playing. It's much easier to watch this game and go, wow, it's 0-0-0, how boring. So, rook e8, rook g1. Levon's like, you want to take my pawn with check? I don't care, take my pawn with check. Go ahead, do your worst. Rook takes g5. My king's just gonna hide in the corner. Now, if you play f4 in this position, thinking that you're so smart, I go b4, I go, actually, your queen has no moves. So, your queen now has to leave. And then I will fork you, maybe. Maybe I will fork you. I don't know, I'll figure it out. Give me a moment, I'll figure it out. So, bishop d1 here by Keimer, looking for a queen trade. And actually, black is worse after bishop d1. I mean, bishop d1, it seems like a very, very nice move. But queen a6, and you still cannot play f4 because b4, and the queen has no moves. For example, if queen to c1, knight c4 check. This is protected, but there is still this. So, bishop e2, rook d8, e4. White's position is almost on the verge of complete collapse. Keimer here has to stay patient for one more move. He had to find f3. Rook takes d5, e takes d5, queen e3, queen f4, sorry, with a fork. And we have this, and bishop b5. Somehow. Hits this rook. If you check me, I can move my king out of the way. Yeah. Instead of that, Keimer played rook h5. The problem is, he had to guard e4. He absolutely had to guard e4, because what's about to happen is very violent and very quick. King b1, rook d4. The rook is aggressive in defense. It cuts this, and there's nothing. Maybe Keimer thought he had some winning sacrifice, but he just doesn't. The queen blocks. So he takes on b5, check here, and rook b5, and one guy has a bishop, and, one guy won a bishop, and the other guy did not win the knight. And Levon survives the absolute lunacy of this game to move to +3. He has won 3 games, he has made 2 draws, he has 4 out of 5, he's won Group C. Everybody can go home. They can all go home. Nobody can catch him. Nobody in Group C has 3 points. Congratulations to Levon, who wins his group with 1 round to spare and becomes the highest rated player in the United States. How about that? He is 1 point above Wesley So. 1 point above Fabiano Caruana. So there you go. Aranyan, the transplant from Armenia to the US, is now the highest rated player. A couple of other games. There is the game also in Group D between Hare Krishna and Dominguez Perez. And there's another game, E4 C5. This one was, and Lanier has to win. Sorry, I keep calling him that. Lanier has to win. And this game, well, somehow in a Sicilian defense, in an Alpine Sicilian, by the 7th move, 8th move, we got something that's like never been played before, which I've just never seen. Now, what do we have? We have a position where everything's been traded, nothing's been traded but the C-pawns, which means that the game will probably be played very much regarding the queen side. White has more space, which means that white can create attack. Yeah, I mean, Lanier was like, all right, dude, you want to give me the bishop? I will. And obviously, the game plan of white was to restrict the movement of the light-squared bishop. So what did white do? He played the bishop passively, and then moved the queen behind it, and then moved it to f5. I mean, very simple game plan, right? It's important. You actually have to do this. Otherwise your position's just not going to be very good. So, knight e2, queen c4, and black just, I told you, was going to play the entire game on... Whoa. Okay, black is going to play the game on two sides. So, queen c6, bishop g5, and white is doing very well now. Knight f4. This is a very, very, very provocative way to play chess. Knight to c4 attacks b2, queen to e2 protects b2, and yeah, I mean, Hare Krishna had really an amazing position. But the problem is that even in an amazing position, you need to try to actually get something done. So, for example, here b3 was very aggressive. Point is that you want to play knight b5. So, for example, knight e5, looking to win on c3. There is b4. There is queen e5 to go over here. There's a lot of tactical opportunities. Knight a4 to go knight c5. Hare Krishna played a4 to try to play knight b5. But he never really got another chance because this amazing bishop d8 to trade off white's active bishop completely changed the course of the game. Lanier no longer has to deal with any sort of aggressive queenside infiltrations. He wins the b2 pawn, and he begins a consolidation process. Like b6, I mean, the knight has no way home. Hashtag Spider-Man. I mean, this is very brave here. Knight into d2. Knight e5 was even stronger. He picks up on c3, and for a brief moment is a piece up, but it's not even about being a piece up. I told you this game was going to be played on the c-file, right? White had more space on the king side, so white could have attacked. But white no longer has any attack, and white is still getting punished on the c-file for ruining his structure. So Lanier wins the d-pawn, he brings all his pieces back, wins the a-pawn. His king can be passive because there's no attack. This knight is not threatening anybody. And the rest of the game is all about a matter of technique. He pushes his d-pawn, makes the white knight and white rook come back, checks, and that's it. I mean, he's simply winning the battle here. Rook e4, and the threat of chopping down the knight and promoting makes Hare Krishna resign on move 51. So, super smooth win by Lanier. And tomorrow, if he wins and Wesley draws, they have to play a playoff. So he's half a point away from Wesley in Group D. Which brings me to my final game of the day between Etienne Bacrot and Andrei Yesipenko. Now, if Yesipenko wants to catch up, he has to win this game. If Bacrot wants to play the role of spoiler, he has to win. We get a Ruy Lopez, we get a Marshall invitation. What I mean by that is that black has not moved the d-pawn. So if white plays c3 and hopes for a mainline Ruy, it's not going to happen because we're going to get d5. Now, the interesting thing about this move order, which Magnus used in the World Championship many times as black, Etienne said afterward that the day before the tournament, he thought none of his opponents would play the Marshall. Like, he never looked at the Marshall once. So when he got to this position, and he was like, wait a minute, is this dude going to play the Marshall? He decided to play an anti-Marshall with a4 and then d4. And then he decided to trade queens and knights. So he trades a lot of pieces and gets to this position. Now, if you look at the structure of the position, it's completely the same. A, B, C, E, F, G, H. All right? No D. No D. No D pawn. So, visually, this hardly looks like anybody can win a game. But Bacrot was playing, he was really playing to make it as annoying as possible for his opponent. He trades bishops. I mean, This is just, guys, shake hands and make a draw. Why is this the final game of the recap? Bishop b7, rook d1. I mean, I just don't understand. Like, how on earth is anybody going to win? What is one of you going to do? Like, accidentally hang a rook or something? You know, guess the Elo style. Okay, knight d2. So we're beginning either a transfer this way or this way. Also f3 to blunt that bishop. Rook d8, f3, okay. a5. Now, if I'm looking at this position, these pawns are going to be permanent endgame liabilities. Let me give you an example. Chop, chop, here. Like, obviously, this is not guaranteed to happen, but this is a problem. Granted, if you get the knight here, it's also a problem for white. So bishop c4, bishop c6, b3, knight d7, trying to bring the knight into the game. And Etienne has a very pleasant position. He can maybe even trade bishops. He can try to put his knight on c4, e4. Chess has to get played, but he goes back. Knight c5, king f2. Again, there's not a whole lot going on. Black plays f6, so now both sides have even more symmetrical structure. Now, what do you do here? You can play knight c4, maybe. Rook takes d1. If this rook comes to d8, you can protect it. And also, again, a5 is a huge liability. So something like here, the rook has to go back. You can't lose that pawn. But Etienne plays c3. And c3 is a massive change to the position. First of all, the computer is such a piece of crap, it wants black to sack a piece. B takes a4, bishop a4, and then there's this. Rook a1 attacks this, rook d2, and now, what do you do? For example, if you take here, b3, black wins. Black wins, you can't stop my pawn. If you play rook a1, I can play a4. Oh my god. The pawns that were supposed to be liabilities, they grew up. They're assets. Oh my god, this is completely nuts. So, instead of that though, Yesipenko plays bishop e8. He must have not liked something. He must have not evaluated that as winning for himself. Didn't see something. But again, I keep telling you guys, the game is changing a lot. Now this rook is active. The c file is opening for white. So it's not clear for who this is better. For whom? All right, we got to be grammatically correct. This is chess channel. We're supposed to be smart. Bishop c4. Rook d4, but things are getting spicy now. I mean, we have things flying off the board. Rook c4, takes. Okay, who's better and why? Rook d8, g3, okay, just a random move. King e7, king e2, rook d4, but who's gonna make it through? How? I mean, black can't break through the white position, except black is a Russian grandmaster. g5, h5, g4, uh-oh. If you take, I will take, and I permanently threaten this. I also permanently threaten this, and you have no pawn mobility. And if you can't move your pawns, it's only black playing for an advantage. So Bakro plays for f4. He chooses not to take on g4. The problem with this is after takes, I overtake you on this side of the board. I mean, amazing game by Yesipenko, who just seizes opportunity in the middle of the board. On the queen side and on the king side. Like we saw in HIKARU versus Grishuk, when you win a battle on 3 sides, you're going to win the game because there's no sides left. And he picks up on f4. It looks like this pawn can get through, but just rook d8. You can't make a queen because after takes, voila, and I win. So rook a1, knight f4, and the game is over. The game is over. Black played king c6 in the game, and white resigned. And folks, that means that tomorrow is a massive final round, because even though Levon has made it in Group C, in Group A, it's Bakro with white, Yesipenko. What? No, sorry, scratch that. It's Yesipenko with white versus HIKARU. If Yesipenko beats HIKARU, he wins. He wins the section. It's a half-point race. So Yesipenko's looking not just for revenge in the head-to-head. He's looking to win the group. Huge matchup tomorrow. You can't write this kind of stuff. Group C, y'all gotta go home. Aranyan showed up to play. We have a big matchup in Group B as well. 3 guys chasing it. And in Group D, it's a two-person race, but it very well could come to a playoff. So stick around. Tomorrow, the Grand Prix group stage ends. We will have a video on Yuri Averbach pretty soon. Much love to you all. And tell me your favorite fruit if you made it this far in the recap.